December, a month people decorate with lights, celebrations, warm gatherings, and cheerful music. To most of the world, it feels like the ending of a chapter, a time to wrap up the year and prepare for something new. But for those who have explored the hidden corners of the spiritual world, December holds a very different meaning, one that is far darker, heavier, and more mysterious than what ordinary people see. When I think about December, I don't think of holidays or joy. I think of long nights, quiet shadows, and a strange heaviness that settles over the minds of people without them realizing it. Before I walked away from the practices I used to be involved in, December was known among us as the month of deep reach, the time when the mind is most exposed and the soul is easiest to influence. Back then, I never questioned why. I simply accepted the whispers and teachings of those around me. But after leaving everything behind and stepping out of that path, I finally started to understand what really happens inside people during this time. December is not dark because spirits roam more freely or because rituals suddenly become more powerful. It is dark because the human heart becomes vulnerable. The long nights stretch endlessly, and the mind fills the empty hours with memories, fears, insecurities, comparisons, regrets, things that feel spiritual, but in reality come from within us. But people don't know this. They don't know how powerful their own inner world becomes in this month. They mistake their emotions for attacks, their loneliness for shadows, and their silence for something supernatural. When I was still practicing, December was the month we watched people, not physically, but emotionally. We observed how their thoughts shifted, how their energy weakened, how easily confusion could settle inside their minds. Long nights gave more time to think, to replay old wounds, to imagine future fears. People didn't realize how much they were feeding their own darkness. And in those circles I used to be part of, we took advantage of that emptiness, not through magic or some dramatic supernatural technique, but simply by understanding human vulnerability. It was easy, too easy. When a mind is tired, cold, lonely, and overwhelmed by expectations, it bends, it breaks, it becomes something you can push with just the slightest emotional weight. Every December I saw a strange pattern in people. Their smiles became thinner, their conversations shorter, their expectations from life became bigger, but their energy to meet those expectations became smaller. They wanted the month to feel festive, but inside, they felt hollow. They looked at happy families online and wondered why their own life felt incomplete. They saw others celebrating and then questioned why they didn't feel the same joy. When a heart enters this confusion, it feels like a shadow is following it. It feels like something invisible is pulling the strings of their emotions. And that is where the real trap begins, inside the mind. The truth I discovered later is that darkness does not enter your life like a force from outside. It grows silently inside you, fed by your own thoughts. And in December, those thoughts become louder. The nights become longer, and silence becomes heavier. Most people don't even know what silence can do to them. Silence can expose the wounds they thought had healed. Silence can amplify the regrets they tried to bury. Silence can make old memories feel like fresh pain. And once those things rise to the surface, people start feeling spiritually attacked, even though the attack is coming from themselves. During my old practices, I heard many say, December is when the veil is thin. At that time, I accepted it. Now I know what it really meant. The veil is not thin between this world and the unseen world. The veil is thin between your conscious mind and your hidden emotions. Everything you suppress throughout the year. Stress, heartbreak, failure, disappointment begins to rise in December. It's not supernatural. It's psychological, but it feels spiritual. And feelings are powerful. Feelings can convince you that something invisible is happening, even when it's just your own heart opening old scars. But in those days, we used this month to understand people's weak points. We paid attention to who was feeling lost, who was emotionally fragile, who was fighting silent battles. And honestly, we didn't have to do anything mystical. People were already breaking on their own. We just watched, and watching someone crumble while believing something spiritual is attacking them, it is both terrifying and heartbreaking. Because they never realize the truth. December becomes dark only when your inner world is dark. Even now, as I look back, I can still feel the coldness of those nights, the eerie quiet, the way people's emotions tangled themselves into knots. And I wish someone had told them the truth, that the darkness wasn't outside them. It was inside them, waiting for December's silence to come alive. When people talk about December, they speak about joy, gatherings, warm lights, celebrations, and the end of a chapter. But no one talks about what the darkness of this month truly does to a human soul. Long before I left the practices that once shaped my beliefs, December was described to me as the month where silence becomes loud. At first, I didn't understand it. How could silence have a sound? How could stillness carry weight? How could a month filled with festivals also be the month with the deepest emotional shadows? But the more I observed people, the more I saw the truth behind that phrase. Silence does have a sound. It whispers to you in ways your mind cannot ignore. December's nights are long, not just in the physical sense, but in the emotional sense too. A long night means more space for thoughts to wander, more time for the mind to revisit the things it avoided all year, more moments where the heart tries to fill emptiness with memories, regrets, and unresolved emotions. Most people don't realize this, but darkness doesn't need to attack you. It just needs you to be alone with your thoughts. And December gives you plenty of that. It doesn't matter if you live in a crowded city or a small, quiet home. December has a way of slowing everything down just enough for the mind to wander into its own hidden corners. There were nights when I used to sit quietly, observing the emotional patterns of the people around me, trying to understand why this month felt heavier, and I started noticing something strange. People smiled more on the outside, but their eyes looked more distant. They were physically present, but mentally somewhere else. They were surrounded by lights, but still felt a kind of inner darkness. I didn't need any ritual or spell to see that something shifted in them during this time. Their aura wasn't darker because of supernatural forces. It was darker because they carried the weight of an entire year's unresolved emotions, every mistake, every fear, every disappointment, every heartbreak. They all come back in December, and people wonder why they feel spiritually attacked. December has always carried ancient weight, even in cultures that never spoke about witchcraft or rituals. Villages in the past used to fear winter because they believed that darkness carried spirits, that long nights allowed shadows to move freely. But now, when humanity has grown rational and modern, those fears have simply changed form. Instead of thinking spirits roam at night, people now say things like, "I feel heavy," or "I feel lost," or "something feels off this month." The words changed, but the experience remains the same. People can sense the heaviness, even if they can't explain it. And because they cannot explain it, they think it comes from outside them. But it doesn't. It comes from the inside. There is something about the cold that makes emotions sink deeper. Something about the dim evenings that makes the soul quieter. Something about the year ending that makes people evaluate everything, every success, every failure, every broken relationship, every dream that didn't come true. They look back at 11 months of life and suddenly feel the weight of everything they avoided feeling. It's not spiritual. It's human. But because humans fear what they cannot control inside themselves, they try to blame something external. They look for a force, a darkness, a spiritual explanation, and December gladly gives them an excuse. During my old life, December was not a month of heightened rituals, at least not in the dramatic way people imagine. It was actually a month of observation, A month where we paid attention to how easily emotions shift. We learned more about human psychology than any ritual could ever teach. I saw people crumble under the pressure of holiday expectations. I saw families fight because they felt they weren't living the life they wished for. I saw individuals fall into loneliness even when surrounded by people. And the strangest thing was, everyone thought something external was responsible. But the truth was that their own thoughts were louder in the silence of December. December exposes the wounds that people pretend they don't have. A broken heart feels more broken. A regret feels more sharp. A failure feels more painful. A dream that didn't happen feels more distant. People keep themselves busy throughout the year so they don't have to face these things. But December slows life down, and when that happens, the inner world rises to the surface. And when it rises, it feels like darkness. When I left the practices I was once part of, I started to see December differently. I realized that the month is not cursed or spiritually dangerous. It is simply honest, brutally honest. It shows you the truth of your inner state. If you have unresolved memories, December will show them. If you have unhealed pain, December will remind you. If you have hidden fears, December will bring them out. And most people mistake this honesty for spiritual darkness. But darkness is not a force. Darkness is an absence of clarity, an absence of inner light, an absence of emotional peace. And December exposes that absence. That's why it feels like something is happening spiritually. But the real battle is not happening around you. It is happening inside you. There is a strange illusion that December creates, and most people never see it until they are already lost inside it. This illusion is subtle, quiet, and almost invisible. It begins with small thoughts, barely noticeable, like a gentle whisper passing through the mind. A tiny moment of doubt, a short wave of sadness, a sudden flash of loneliness. These feelings come from within, but people feel them as if they are floating in the air around them. The more they try to ignore them, the stronger they grow. And slowly, these emotions start taking shape, becoming something people interpret as darkness, not because something supernatural entered their lives, but because their own mind is trying to speak after staying silent for too long. December has a way of softening the walls people build around themselves. Throughout the year, everyone stays busy. Work, responsibilities, social media, conversations, distractions. They don't have time to think about how they truly feel. But when the year ends and silence begins to take over, those walls begin to crack. The emotions behind them start leaking out. December is not dangerous because of rituals or hidden forces. It's dangerous because humans are not ready to face the truth of their own hearts. In my earlier life, when I still followed the practices I have abandoned now, I watched people fall into these emotional traps with such ease that it shocked me. They would blame bad luck, negative energy, spirits, fate, anything except themselves. I remember sitting in dimly lit rooms, listening to people talk about the heaviness they felt. They believed they were under spiritual attack. They believed something unseen was affecting them. But no one ever realized that the real attack came from the places inside them they refused to face. I didn't need to influence them. No one did. They were already spiraling inside their own emotions.
There is a reason why people feel more broken in December than in any other month.
The holidays show them pictures of perfect families, perfect relationships, perfect lives. Social media becomes a parade of smiles and celebrations. Lights fill the streets. Music fills the shops. Everyone seems happy. And in the middle of all this, a person who is struggling feels even more alone. The contrast between their inner world and the outer world becomes painful. They begin to question their own life. They start comparing. They start feeling behind. This is the first trap, comparison. And comparison is one of the most powerful forms of emotional poison. It doesn't kill you instantly. It kills you slowly, layer by layer, thought by thought. The second trap is regret. As the year ends, people look back at everything they didn't achieve. Everything they lost, everything that went wrong. They replay old memories and wish they could change them. They wish they had acted differently. They wish life had been kinder. These regrets rise like shadows in the mind, stretching across every corner of the heart. And once again, people believe something external is making them feel this way. But the truth is, December simply gives them enough silence to hear their own regrets clearly. The third trap is loneliness. Even people with families, friends, or social circles feel an emptiness they cannot describe. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of emotional connection. December magnifies this absence. The cold air, the dim evenings, the long nights, they all contribute to a feeling of isolation. And in that isolation, the mind begins to wander into dark territories. It imagines things that aren't real. It creates fears that have no source. It convinces you that something is wrong, even when nothing is. And this creates the illusion of a spiritual presence, when in reality, it is only your own fear echoing inside you. What made this month even more powerful in the practices I once followed was not magic, it was psychology. People are incredibly vulnerable when they feel alone. They look for meaning. They look for signs. They look for explanations. They want to understand why they feel the way they feel. And when the heart is desperate for answers, it accepts anything, any belief, any fear, any fantasy, any lie, even the lie that something dark is controlling them. I have seen people break down in December more than in any other month. They would sit in front of us, shaking, confused, overwhelmed, believing they were spiritually cursed. But what they didn't know was that they were facing their own inner demons, not supernatural ones. The demons of fear, regret, envy, disappointment, self-doubt, and loneliness. And these demons are far more powerful than anything mystical. When a person becomes emotionally weak, their mind becomes a battlefield. A single thought can feel like a force. A single memory can feel like an attack. A single fear can feel like a presence. This is where December becomes dangerous, not because darkness increases, but because emotional resistance decreases. I realized something important after leaving my old life behind. You don't need rituals to control a person. You just need their mind to be tired. You just need their heart to be wounded. You just need their soul to be quiet enough for their fears to speak louder than their strength. And December naturally creates this environment. People spend so much time trying to protect themselves from the outside world, but they never learn to protect themselves from their inside world. And that is why December consumes them, when the heart is unguarded and the mind is vulnerable. Even a small emotion feels like a shadow creeping in. And the scariest thing about this shadow is that it has your face, your voice, your thoughts, but you only notice it when the world around you becomes quiet enough. When I finally stepped away from the practices that shaped my old life, the first thing I had to face was silence, not the ordinary kind, the deep, uncomfortable silence that forces you to confront everything you've ignored for years. And strangely, that silence felt exactly like the December nights I had watched for so long. Cold, heavy, and almost too honest. For the first time, I realized that the shadows I believed were outside me were actually inside me the whole time. They had always been there, waiting for a quiet moment to speak. And December simply gave them the perfect stage. The more distance I created from my past, the clearer it became how badly people misinterpret the weight they feel during this month. They believe the heaviness is a sign of spiritual danger. They think the darkness around them is real. But the truth, very few people are willing to accept, is that the danger comes from within. December only exposes what you carry. It doesn't create it. I remember a woman who once came to us in the last week of December. She was trembling, unable to explain the strange fear she felt every night. She said she couldn't sleep because she felt watched. She believed something invisible was following her. Her voice cracked. Her eyes were tired. and she held her arms tightly as if protecting herself from the cold. But as she spoke, I realized the truth. She wasn't being watched by anything supernatural. She was being watched by her own memories. She had spent the entire year running from her pain, burying her heartbreak, suppressing her regrets, forcing herself to smile for others. But December slowed her world. It took away the noise she used as armor, and when the noise faded, the memories resurfaced. The fear she thought was spiritual was actually emotional. The darkness she felt was the darkness she had refused to face. That night, I saw clearly how a human mind can create the illusion of a shadow simply by refusing to heal. People expect December to feel magical, peaceful, warm. They expect the month to deliver closure, comfort, and happiness. And when those expectations collide with reality, the crash feels brutal. This is the fourth trap: expectation. The expectation that life should feel different because the calendar is ending. The expectation that joy should appear automatically. The expectation that the pain of the year should fade on its own. But it doesn't. Pain doesn't follow the calendar. Emotions don't reset just because the year is ending. And when people realize this, they start believing something is wrong with them. They think the month itself is cursed. They think they are under attack. They think they are spiritually broken. But they are simply human. December forces the truth out of people. It exposes who you are beneath the distractions. It shows you the wounds you haven't healed. It shows you the dreams you abandoned. It shows you the loneliness you deny. It shows you the version of yourself you hide from everyone else. And when that version finally appears in front of you, it feels like meeting a stranger who looks like you, but carries everything you never wanted to face. For years, I thought witches, rituals, energies, and shadows made December powerful. But when I finally walked away, I discovered a different truth. December is powerful because it reveals the fragile places inside you. Your disappointments, your mistakes, your insecurities, your failures. They all sit quietly in the dark corners of your heart. And in December, when the nights stretch longer and the silence grows deeper, those emotions start moving again. You feel them. You hear them. You mistake them for spiritual weight. But they are simply the parts of you that need healing. There were nights after I left my old life when I sat alone, listening to the cold wind outside, feeling the same heaviness that once made me believe something supernatural was near. But this time, I didn't run from it. I didn't try to explain it away. I let it speak, and what I heard was not the voice of a spirit, but the voice of my own soul, a soul tired of carrying things it never resolved, a soul finally brave enough to admit that the darkness came from wounds, not from forces. That realization changed everything. People fear darkness because they believe it hides something dangerous. But sometimes darkness hides the truth. It hides the emotions you push aside. It hides the guilt you never admitted. It hides the pain you pretend doesn't exist. And in December, when the world slows just enough, the darkness lifts its veil and shows you what you've been avoiding. The real danger is not in the dark. It is in ignoring what the dark reveals. The final trap of December is surrender. When people feel overwhelmed, they surrender to their emotions. They let their fears guide them. They let their regrets chain them. They let their thoughts manipulate them. And the moment a person surrenders internally, even the smallest sadness feels like a shadow standing behind them. Even the smallest fear feels like a presence in the room. Even the smallest doubt feels like a whisper. And they convince themselves something supernatural is at play. But it is only their broken pieces calling out for attention. Now, when I speak about December, I don't call it the darkest month. I call it the most honest month, because honesty feels like darkness when you've lived too long in denial. December doesn't haunt people. It reveals them. It doesn't attack them. It uncovers them. It doesn't bring spiritual danger. It brings emotional truth, and the scariest truth of all is this: the shadows you fear most are the shadows you carry inside yourself.